Hello, so today we're going to be talking about understanding making boards balance and mentality, talking about why comps are strong, what to do, and when to complain. So this is going to be a little bit of a doozy of a video. I'm kind of combining two different ideas here, but the main crux of the video that I'm going to talk about a lot is constructing boards and identifying what makes a particular board strong, especially if you're trying to cook up or create a board on your own. That's going to be the main part of it, but then I also want to talk a little bit about some stuff I've been seeing just in general with like this current set of TFT of just like complaining and needlessly being angry and stuff like that. So I'm also going to talk a little bit about that just because I'm noticing it in my own community here in like comment section and stuff. So I'm going to call out that behavior because I think it's important, but I'm going to leave that till the end because obviously, like, you know, we're going to make this video still as informative as possible, and then the crash out will be a crash out towards the end. But anyways, if you want to know who I am, this is me. I do daily TFT content, usually some more for fun content or guides or VOD reviews, trying to give you the best in your set 14 TFT experience. So if you like that style of content, please make sure to like and subscribe because it does help me out as a smaller TFT content creator. Additionally, we're working on our 10,000 sub goal. I'm really going to try and push to get those 10,000 subs before the end of this set. So I'm going to try and do some really high quality or more interesting content on my channel in this last little stretch. We're at 9,000 subs, which is amazing. We're already higher than I thought we would ever reach. So thanks for all the support. Thanks for everybody that's stopping by, and if I helped you along the way, make sure to drop that subscribe because it does help me out and it's totally free. So why is complaining? There's a lot of stuff that I'm seeing this set about just people being needlessly annoying, angry, and complaining all the time. I complain a lot, but I complain equally for every set. I'm just noticing a lot in different communities, comment sections, chats, like rage bait, all this garbage, which I don't like that much. So a lot of this we're going to return to it towards the end of like complaining about stuff. But before we do that, I'm going to try and like paint the picture walking up there, talking about comps and constructing boards and some of the frustration that might come with that, which I think is part of the reason why parts of this, in addition to like the set itself, basically adding to that like fuel to fire. But this is going to talk about like, you know, power allocation and balance and talking about different comps and why they're particularly strong, because in the current patch I think a lot of people didn't enjoy the most recent patch that existed. But in terms of power allocation or balance, a lot of times what I mean by this is that when things are balanced in TFT, obviously this is a huge generalization. I'm not a dev and I do not mean to simplify or talk about anything that the devs are doing in a way that is taking away from their actual skills, but in balancing, there's basically like two ideas that sometimes come up, and that is playing around or balancing around powerful units and balancing around powerful traits. So powerful units, the idea is that if a unit is really powerful, that usually makes things very flexible because it's basically like, hey, if I play that unit, I can construct a board around that unit. As long as I can support that unit, then that unit will do a lot of damage. A lot of times it's also hard to figure out, and it usually leads to you having a lot of contested units in the game. A good example of a really strong unit as of the most recent patch is Garen. If you have a Garen 2 and you give Garen 2 items, this unit does almost as much damage as any other carry in the game without having to be tied to any particular traits. And especially with this high cap potential of God of the Net, you can actually give a lot of traits to your board to make it really powerful. Typically that's how 5 costs are usually designed. They're meant to be these powerful units that you can then slot into your board that allows you to have flexible high cap options for your team. But additionally, this can extend to 4 costs or other parts of the game, and it's something that existed in many of the past sets of TFT, where there's particularly strong units, and you're basically just gunning for a subset of either frontline or backline units that you can play around, and then trying to build a board to support those units in particular. However, another thing that comes up with balance a lot of times is powerful traits. This often leads to fixed boards. When I say a powerful trait, what I mean is that there is going to be a particular synergy that is really dominant or really powerful, especially if it gets buffed for a particular patch. Sometimes it's overtuned, sometimes undertuned, etc. And a lot of times this makes simpler boards because obviously you just click all the units that share the same synergy, you throw them together, and bang, you have a really good board. And typically what ends up happening is then the trait is contested. So a lot of people try and angle themselves towards that particular trait, hold on to many of the units that all share the same synergy, but likewise making other units very open and very pliable and easy to hit. When you're thinking about balance with TFT, or when you're considering balance with TFT, sometimes there is a mixture of both of these things. And a lot of times the reason there's a mixture of both of these things is because they're both good to have. one isn't strictly better than the other, and obviously this is an oversimplification, but a lot of times you'll hear things like, you know, having really strong traits is a lot easier because like the boards are very easy to make. You just play all the same units. That's something that benefits beginner players. I'm sure everybody, you can remember your first game of TFT or your first couple games of TFT, or if you're a beginner right now watching this video, something that helps out a lot is when you queue into a game, you look at a unit that you have and you say, oh, what's their synergy? Oh, they're Exotech, or oh, they're Anima. I'll just hold on to all the Anima units and I'll play the Anima units on my board. That's like a typical strategy that actually comes up a lot, especially when you're starting out in the game. So powerful traits are really important to capture that experience for players that are new to the game, as well as like all the way up the ladder. Like you can be a challenger level player and powerful traits could be a benefit for multiple reasons. And then powerful units, sometimes it's hard to figure out. It's like, unless you know in particular that one unit is strong, you kind of have to know the unit is strong and how to properly bring out their potential, and then build a board to support that unit, which then you have to like have a proper understanding of how to construct a board such that you actually support the unit. So it's often a little bit more difficult, but often more flexible because you can basically play anything. So, you know, there's a balance of both of them. Me personally, I like powerful units. That's just a me thing. But either is fine, and both are actually good for a multitude of reasons. So obviously an oversimplification, which is something I want to start by talking about. Next, we want to talk a little bit about what makes a particular comp strong. We're talking about vertical traits. We're talking about, you know, synergies. We're talking about units, right? What actually makes the comp strong? If you want to simplify it down to its core, the thing that makes the comp strong is understanding that balance between your front line and your back line. You basically want to have enough front line to tank, and you want to have enough back line to do damage. The idea is that if your front line could sustain long enough, then your backline will have enough time to do damage, and if your backline has enough damage, then your front line doesn't have to tank that much. It's a matter of balancing these two things, which becomes very difficult and often takes a lot of trial and error, or somebody just tells you how to do it. Like, you know, if you watch any of my guides or stuff like that on my channel, I'll just like say, hey, I think this is the more optimal way to play it, or this is okay, or these are the items, or blah blah blah, right? That's what usually what you're looking for when you're trying to analyze or create a board that makes something particularly strong. Additionally, when you have things like we're talking about balancing and frontline and backline, all of these things, something that happens a lot in a patch is that a patch has like an intrinsic characteristic of TFT. This is actually a great part of TFT, and that is that patches tend to balance themselves a lot of the times, because the comps that are strong are typically going to be played more. Right? If a comp is really strong and is really common, it's going to be more contested. And when it's more contested, it's going to be harder to hit those units, because if you don't know, the units are shared in a pool. There's only a certain amount of each unit in the game. So if one person's playing the same comp as another person, it's going to be harder to hit those units. So that's a huge benefit. Additionally, weaker comps are typically not contested. So a lot of times you can have strategies that just revolve around playing not necessarily the strongest comp, but either the weakest comp, so you're really high HP, you hit all your units, you're really stable, or you can play a weak comp and use it as a stepping stone to like fast high level, hit a bunch of other units, cap out your board really high around really strong units, which are typically 5 costs. And that helps to balance a patch within itself a lot of the times. And the more you play on a patch, the more this becomes apparent in terms of understanding the limits of what a certain comp can do, and the limits of what a certain weak comp or strong comp has in terms of their full potential, based on whether you're contested or uncontested. A lot of times, something that's also really important to note is that that's why 4-cost comps are usually like a quote-unquote default style of gameplay, because most 4-cost comps can actually support 2 players, right? There's enough units in the pool that the average of you hitting and somebody else hitting is pretty high, so long as you're not too contested. A lot of times a one-way contest is pretty reliable, and it helps itself a lot in terms of playing the patch. So now, we all know where this was going. I think we all knew it. The big elephant in the room. The big elephant in the room, or we could say the big warthog, or whatever Sejuani rides, that's Exotech. Exotech is the big thing this patch, which I think is causing a lot of frustration, and we're going to talk about it right now. So let's talk about Exotech in a lot of different regards. Let's first think about Exotech as a board. So first of all, Exotech, if you don't know, basically what I'm referring to is playing vertical. I'm trying to look for my, I had something prepared here. I was just trying to find the tab. So if we're looking at Exotech, Exotech basically is just playing 7 Exotech. Recently, Exotech got buffed. This was happened in the previous patch. Upcoming patch this Wednesday is 14.7. We're currently on 14.6. So in patch 14.6, there was a huge buff to Exotech where it gave a bunch of HP and attack speed per item. This used to be like, I think 240, and then they buffed it to 300. So basically with this board, you basically just play 7 Exotech. you get a huge amount of attack speed, which you really like on Zeri because she's a big auto attacker anyway, so attack speed works really well on her. And you get a huge amount of HP per item held. Exotech is also a trait that gives you items. So if you play 7 Exotech, you get 3 Exotech items for free, which equates to each giving 300 HP on your units. This board is extremely tanky, and it's extremely dominant because it's hard to deal with. Besides that, the board is also obnoxious in the fact that it has 3 stuns. Sejuani has pretty much the best stun in the game, besides maybe like arguably Zac, if you consider that to be like the best stun. But either way, she makes like a giant stun, which is really disruptive and can stall out for really long. Mordekaiser has a little bit of a stun, which is annoying, and that's kind of cool, I guess. And then additionally, Varus has a stun. So guess what? Stun, stun, stun. It's very hard to chew through this board because not only does the board have a lot of HP that you have to chew through because of Exotech, everything on this board is going to be extremely tanky and extremely hard to kill. Additionally, the board also has a bunch of stuns, which helps to stall out really well. So when you play Zeri, which you usually want to stack attack speed on, stuff like Gwinsu Krakens, for example, is a really common build. Gwinsu is actually debatable if you actually need it or not, because she has so much attack speed from Exotech. But either way, really good item pairing, because something like Krakens, every attack that you do gives you stacking attack damage. You're stunning and you're stalling out forever. Eventually, the Zeri just goes around and one-shots everybody. She clutches up at the end because she's hard to catch. She's jumping around everywhere, and she's gaining a bunch of AD and attack speed, and then at one point she's just melting everybody. So the board is very annoying, very obnoxious, and it's also very easy to play because this is a board that is tied to the trait being really strong. 7 Exotech is strong, so it's very easy. You just click all the Exotech units. They all look the same. No offense to them, but I just mean like they all have like the same skin or aesthetic, right? That little like cybery, yellow, goldish, orangey with silver armor and stuff, right? So they kind of fit together really well, and then usually you just play Kindred for the synergies. This is something that's extremely powerful and extremely strong. And it's also supported by the stats. But the problem with this comp is not as much like the ease and the other stuff. It's mostly the tankiness of the comp. Something that happens a lot when you play comps that are extremely tanky is that there's this aesthetic, or not aesthetic, that's not the right word. There is this concept that comes up, and that is you have to be this tall to ride, right? Now, that might sound really weird, it might sound really bad out of context, but the idea is that if you have a really tanky comp, you have to have a board that is optimized to a point of being able to chew through the tankiness, or else you lose for free. Something that I talk about a lot when I do patch reviews, as well as when I do like different things like on my comp guides and stuff like that. I often explain saying, hey, like this comp is really consistent because it has a very good front line and very good tankiness. When we're talking about front line and back line, if we make it so that every unit on our board is hard to kill with something like Exotech where they have a lot of HP, this board will eventually outscale anybody. It doesn't even matter what Zeri items you have a lot of times, especially if you're like unfamiliar with the game and you don't know like what items belong on what units very easily. This board will still be very oppressive because you have to be this tall to ride. You have to be fighting this board. You have to have a board strong enough and coherent enough to chew through all the HP, or else you will lose the round for free because of all the stuns and the Zeri eventually ramping up with rapid fire. Even if you don't have good items, or if you have good items on her, she will eventually ramp up and kill everything. So that's what makes it very oppressive. So when you're playing the comp, you have to think to yourself, what do I do here? You need to find a comp that has enough DPS or enough frontline in order to deal with it, and that often shapes the way a patch kind of feels, right? If your comp is really hard to chew through, it doesn't really matter your skill level, it doesn't really matter like what you're playing. It kind of just matters like if you have the DPS check to chew through this comp, yes or no, that determines the outcome of the fight. So it doesn't matter how good your spot is, it doesn't matter how many upgrades you have, it doesn't matter, like you can have a board that's like, you know, giga strong, right? You can have a board that's like, you know, for example, like Brand right now isn't very good because he's not able to chew through these boards really fast. But you can have like Brand 2, like Nico 2, right? You can have everybody upgraded and have like everybody really strong with, but if you're not 3-star, 2-star, and but if your item quality and the quality of your units and the synergy that you have active don't make this comp hit like a truck, then you won't chew through this board and you'll always lose to it because it's just like a movable object. It's just like a giant brick wall that you're just forced to deal with. And we can notice that that becomes really apparent, right? This is something that actually this is a concept that kind of like, I don't know what the right word is. Like, it's really, really bad or really annoying the worse you are at the game. And I don't mean that as an insulting way. What I mean is that if you're not capable of figuring out a board or copying a board or like imitating a board well enough to chew through a tanky board, you will struggle to be able to beat the board just based off the fact that like on its own it's just too tanky for you to deal with. That's just something that happens. It's why these boards are really consistent, and why when I talk to beginner players I always recommend, hey, make a board that's really tanky, because no matter what, your board's gonna be so hard to kill that you'll win the fight just out of sheer time. Like you'll just stall them out long enough that you do enough DPS, because if you stall the comp long enough you'll do enough, right? And you can notice that with stats as well. Now, I'm not going to say stats are the super important way to go. I'm using this as an illustrative purpose only. I want everybody to repeat after me. This is for illustrative purposes only. This is not meant to be the be-all answer or anything. I'm just showing you roughly the concept that I'm trying to explain here in the video in a visual way. So here I'm looking at the stats on tactics.tools for best comps on the current patch, which is 14.6. You'll notice I put it on a filter of Diamond Plus. That's like the default typically when you open up the website, at least for me. So Diamond Plus, you'll notice that Sejuani, Zeri, Exotech is considered to be one of the best performing comps. Its average placement is a 14.6, which is pretty high, a 4.16, which is pretty high. The way you should look at it is that you place an average of 1 to 8, right? You can go first or you can go 8th, right? All of those placements in between. So if you average them out, 4.5 is considered to be average. So anything above 4.5 means that the comp is performing better than average amongst all the players that are Diamond Plus playing this comp. And then you can also see win percentage, top 4 percentage, and play rate. So play rate of 1, meaning that like in every lobby there's usually on average 1 player playing Zeri Exotech, which is pretty common. Compared to a lot of the other ones, you can see the play rates are all like sub 1 for most other comps on the current patch. Now, something you'll notice is 14.16, really good number, really well performing, really powerful and really dominant. If we go to a lower level of gameplay, let's say Plat, which of course I'm not insulting Plat players. I'm not saying that is a bad thing to be in Plat. I'm just trying to illustrate a purpose. I'm not trying to offend anybody in any way, right? But if you go down the ladder, you'll notice Exotech Zeri will perform better. Right now it averages a 4.01 with a higher win percentage and a higher top 4 percentage. There's also this aspect which we'll come back to later, that the play rate is actually lower, and that's usually a lot of times when people are playing in like, you know, the lower elo, or I don't like using those words. I never want to be offensive to players that are not playing as much of the game or are new to the game. What I'm just trying to illustrate is that like when you're less familiar with the patch, or you're less familiar with what comps are strong or what comps aren't strong, typically you'll see stuff like this, right? The comp will be less contested. More people will play other things, because instead of playing Zeri, they'll just think to play something else, and it lets the Zeri players hit a lot harder, for example, in this case, which ups the average placement, makes it a lot stronger, and it makes it more dominant and also more annoying, because you're going to lose very hard to the particular comp. If you compare that to, like, you know, the highest filter we have here, which is Grandmaster Plus, we're going to notice something different, right? Uh-oh, Spaghettio, Zeri's not here anymore. Uh-oh, Spaghettio, Zeri's not here anymore. Uh-oh, Zeri's not here. Where's Zeri? Oh, here's Exotech Zeri. Okay, now we're getting somewhere, right? You can see the play rate is a lot higher, 1.17. It means on average there's more than one Zeri player in a lobby. You can see the top 4 rate, the win percentage, and the placement is all lower. It's closer to that 4.5. It's closer to looking like a balanced comp at these high level of gameplays. Why is that? Well, part of it is that more people are playing Zeri, so there's going to be, or sorry, more people, not like numerically, but more people in a lobby, a Grandmaster lobby, are playing around Zeri because they identify this as the strong, consistent comp to play. But additionally, it's also that Zeri becomes a lot less strong when players are able to optimize around that you have to be this tall to ride kind of situation. A lot of times you're playing comps from better spots. A lot of these you can see they have very low very low play rates. I'm not saying these comps are better than Zeri. Zeri is still the best comp in the game. Don't get me wrong. I'm going to say it very clearly. Exotech is still the best comp in the game. But it's a lot easier to deal with because there's either people contesting it, which makes it inherently a lot worse, or people are playing other comps from really good spots because they can identify their better items, their better situations, their better augments, their better board states, their better synergies active. They can construct better boards to contest the Zeri players better, which makes the comp a little bit worse, and it makes it a little bit more item dependent, a little more situational. It's still the best comp in the game. Don't get me wrong. I want to make it very clear. No matter what the skill level is, the comp is still very strong, borderline broken. I'm just trying to illustrate that this too tall to ride pass kind of makes these comps like seem way worse at lower levels of gameplay. And this extends to all TFT patches all the time, right? Another thing that's really hard to deal with, for example, is like another comp that's really common, you can look at it similarly, is Vanguard Marksman, right? 6 Vanguard, similar idea to Exotech Zero. You basically just play 6 Vanguard units, you have this insane amount of frontline that's so hard to deal with, to a point where you don't even need upgrades. A lot of times this board you actually do really well without even having Leona 2 Aphelios 2, Xayah 2, because you can just stall out to give yourself enough time to do the damage with enough frontline that you have here. It's something that's really common that shows up a lot, and that's like this idea that I'm just trying to say. You have to be this tall to ride. The idea that you have to actually be able to overcome these really tanky boards, which can make something feel a lot more frustrating, and it also stifles a lot of the play, right? So common frustrations is like when the comp is really tanky, often you can't play random bullshit and get away with it. You get punished a lot harder. If your board isn't coherent and isn't particularly well optimized to actually play around your units and bring out the most of your unit, some easy ass board that somebody just throws a bunch of Exotech units on the board is going to absolutely rail you, because you won't be able to clear the board very effectively. So you have to know what you're playing really well. You have to play comps from a really good spot and have to properly identify the spots for those comps in order to actually compete, because you have to chew through this front line that is going to be really strong, right? It can also feel really bad if you're not constructing those strong boards. If you have a board and you're just trying to like play like whatever, I know like this is something that I used to do a lot, and something that I see especially when I coach people, where they just like play random units and think that it will just work together properly, but it doesn't necessarily work all the time, because if you're not constructing a board that actually fits together and uses your items well, uses your components well, uses your synergies well, then you're going to get punished really hard by these tanky boards, because you just won't be able to kill anything and you're just going to lose instantly, right? Like if you queue into this board, you don't even need Sejuani 2, right? If you don't know, Sejuani isn't the main tank in this comp. You usually put your main tank items on Mordekaiser, and you just put like, you just slam Protector's Vow on Sejuani. The Sejuani isn't even the tank in this comp. So this comp not only is really strong, it's also really cheap, because like your main tank to tank most of the damage is actually the Mordekaiser, which is crazy, because like that's not an expensive unit, versus like other comps that you might think of that you need like multiple 4 costs in order to upgrade them in order to keep up with the damage and the tankiness. That's where things can really fall apart really fast. Additionally, if a consistent and stable comp is really relevant, then when you take low rolls or if you play really risky, it can feel a lot worse, because if you're playing a very risky comp, your spot is going to be really hard if you don't hit your particular thing, because you're not going to be the stable player, right? Like if you're trying to fast 9, you're going to get punished by all these players, and even if you make it to level 9, if you don't have good items or upgrade your units, you're just going to lose to the Zeri player anyways. You might lose to a Zeri 1 Sejuani 1 even if you're level 9, because you won't be able, if you don't hit your units, you don't have good items on your units, you won't be able to chew through the front line. That's like the idea here, right? And a lot of it comes from balancing your front line, your back line, which is really important as a concept, and that can make things very frustrating. And I think this is where a lot of frustrations happen, especially when Exotech is relevant, because this isn't the only patch Exotech was relevant. Exotech was relevant like basically Exotech was good like the first 2 patches of the game, then it got nerfed and it was shit for majority of the game, and now they just recently buffed it within the last 2 weeks to try and add it back to the rotation, and it got a little bit over buffed in my opinion. And now it's like really dominant, and a lot of people are like, this fucking sucks, I hate this, like fucking shit, like, you know, everybody's upset. And it's like, you know, I look at it, I'm like, hey, Zeri was like not playable for majority of the set, it's finally playable, and it's not even that bad. Like at least in my lobbies, like, you know, there's 1 or 2 Exotech players. If there's ever more than 2 Exotech players, they're all bought for anyways, right? It's not dominant to a point, at least in my experiences, because I'm at a point where it's like I'm playing boards that are optimized enough to deal with it. Which that's not meant to be a flex at all. Also, like I said, this isn't supposed to make you feel bad. That's for later when I start roasting the commenters that are really annoying me. But right now, it's just like I'm just trying to say like this is just a common occurrence that can happen, and just know that you're not alone. But there are ways around it, and a lot of it is just getting better at constructing your boards and playing around your things, or playing around your units. So a lot of times when you're creating boards, you often have to figure out what best supports your front line and your back line. And one key thing that is always important, I always have to say this very clearly, you want to make sure that every unit on your board has purpose. Every unit on your board has to have a meaning and a purpose to being on the board. It can't just be there to light up the left side of your screen. I'm not trying to personally attack anybody. I'm not trying to be rude to anybody. But there's a lot of people where you play TFT and you care more about what the left side of your screen says with all the synergies instead of looking at what the units are actually doing. Every unit has to be contributing in some way to your board in a meaningful way. They have to be either helping your front line or your back line. And if your front line has a tank, they have to be supporting your main tank. If your back line has a main carry, it has to be supporting your main carry. These are the things that matter the most in the game to optimize your damage output and to optimize the board that you're playing. So for example, we're going to go through some examples. Sorry, I said for example, we're going through some more examples. Excuse me today. It's really hot in my room, and it's only getting hotter as I record this video with the computer just like cooking my room up. But let's talk about Vanguard Marksman. This was a board that actually went through a couple optimizations along the way, and it's also very similar to the Zeri board. I wouldn't say it's as dominant as the Exotech Zeri line, but it is something that you usually play, and it's a version like this that works really well into the Zeri line that you can actually beat it a lot of the times. So let's look at this board and let's think about it. So Vanguard Marksman, there's lots of different variations of it. So the first variation is obviously this one. I need to one second. I need to open up another tab. 1 second. There we go. So this is the common variation of Vanguard Marksman. So let's think of the first thing that we can look at here, right? Why do we play 6 Vanguard? Well, 6 Vanguard recently got buffed, so it's really important, it's really strong. It also gives you a sufficient front line to keep up with the front line or the tankiness of the Zeri comp in a lot of cases. The optimal front line being 6 Vanguard is mostly because 6 Vanguard got a big buff that makes it extremely strong, but a lot of times this board is not super strong. It's more of like a consistent top 4, not like a game winning comp unless you hit certain win conditions, because it does lack a little bit of damage because you're basically only playing 2 backline damage units, and if they die early you basically lose for free, and if they don't have good items on them they don't ramp up effectively. But typically when you're playing this comp, you're basically building a Felios similar to Zeri. You go Gwinsu and you go Kraken Slayer. And the idea is that if your front line can sustain long enough, I'm looking for Kraken Slayer, excuse me. If your front line can sustain long enough, Aphelios will ramp up with Gwinsu, do a bunch of auto attacks, and then we'll also gain the Krakens stacking the AD, which will make the Aphelios eventually be strong enough to clear up the board and win out the round in particular. So these items are really important, and they're usually a priority, especially if you're playing around this line in particular. Something that also benefits from 6 Vanguard is that, if you have like Xayah in, she has time to like kind of burst through and chew through all the units instead of having to like hit the one unit in particular. She can kind of go through the units one by one, delete them, while the Aphelios then ramps up and cleans up towards the end. So now, let's talk about some very obvious lack of optimization that we can do here. One thing that we can easily say is, well, why don't, instead of playing 6 Vanguard, why don't we drop 6 Vanguard? And instead, we play some other synergy. Like, for example, sometimes you might say, okay, well, I don't have 6 Vanguard, so I'll play 4 Vanguard, and then maybe I'll just play something like crazy, like 2 Bruiser, for example. Now, obviously, this is going to be wrong. Like, we all know, like, why would you play 2 Bruiser here? Bear with me. It's just for example, and it's also to explain it to people that may not be familiar with the reasoning behind this, right? So what are we doing? We're dropping our Vanguards down to from 6 to 4. So we're losing a health shield that is effectively 12%, what is that, 16%? We're losing a 16% health shield going from 6 to 4, right? And we're also losing, this happens at combat start and at 50% health, so we're losing 2 16% health shields. We're losing around effectively 32% health on all our Vanguard units. And what are we adding instead? We're adding Bruiser, right? It lights up another thing on the side of our screen, which is cool. Like maybe you have Bronze for Life or something like that. You're trying to make a creative board. Maybe you hit Cho'Gath 2. You're trying to play Cho'Gath 2. Who knows? But the thing is that your Bruisers aren't benefiting from Vanguard. So these 2 Bruiser units, especially without items, it doesn't matter that they have Bruiser active. They're going to be shit. They're not going to work well. Additionally, 2 Bruiser, it gives your board 100 HP, so you might think it's really good, right? 100 HP on the whole board. Gragas, for example, gives an extra 60 HP because of his Divinicorp bonus. So you might look at it and think to yourself, this is something that helps my board a little bit. However, the effective bonuses from these 2 units is completely fucking useless because you're losing 16% health plus 16% health, so 2 16% health shields on all of these 4 Vanguard units. And typically, the only units that matter on your comp are usually going to be the units that are itemized. So when a unit has items, they perform a lot better. They are going to actually be meaningful. If a unit doesn't have items, they're pretty much useless. They don't really do anything. So a lot of times, you're not going to have enough tank items to itemize all your units. You're pretty much just going to have tank items on this Leona. So if Leona has a tank item, I'm just going to put Protector's Vow because it's the first one I saw, right? Leona wants to have as much of her synergies active in order to properly bring out the most of her tankiness. So having these extra units giving, Leona 160 HP, you could put 160 HP on the whole board, sure. It's not that much HP, it's around like 800 or so HP. She's losing 16% health, right? Like, that 800 HP is almost meaningless because you're basically just giving this Leona a little bit of extra HP instead of giving her, like, the full extent of her Vanguard synergy, which is, like, to give her, like, a 30% health shield. If she has, like, 2,000 or 3,000 health, do the math, it's already going to outscale the Bruiser HP without even considering the extra units that you have on your board. So a lot of times when you're playing this board, that's why something like 6 Vanguard makes a lot of sense. And that's pretty obvious, right? You just play around the synergies, construct your front line, construct your back line. Now, why is 6 Vanguard so much better than the previous version, which is 6 Vanguard 4 Marksman? And the answer is, it's actually not that much better. It works out to be much better, don't get me wrong. But this used to be a variation that was played before. This is something that also made sense. Because basically, what you're doing is you're trading some frontline synergy. Instead of being 6 Vanguard, you're going to 4 Vanguard. But you're making up for it by adding synergies that help your backline to do more damage, which is the 4 Marksman trait. The only thing is that with 4 Marksman, this was a little bit more burst heavy and actually relied a lot on Xayah chewing through units in order to do an effective amount of damage. At the start of the current patch, like 14.6, it's 2 weeks old now, or around 2 weeks old. The first week of 14.6, a lot of people thought 4 Marksman, 4 Vanguard was equally as strong as 6 Vanguard, and a lot of people played this variation still. Some people still play it to this day in certain spots if they hit 4 Marksman and they don't hit 6 Vanguard. It's still fine, but the reason it's not good is because with the amount of HP that a lot of boards have, either via reroll or Exotech, it's just a really bad matchup into those particular matchups because the extra marksman scaling that you get with 4 Marksman is pretty irrelevant because the Xayah can't one-shot and kill units pretty effectively even with the 4 Marksman. So a lot of times your front line just collapses too early and you lose because of that anyways. So the optimization that eventually now it's like, you almost always play 6 Vanguard is because you'd rather just have the extra HP to ramp up the Aphelios because you're playing against other comps that have a lot of HP. If the other comps end up not having as much HP, or it becomes a more burst heavy meta style comp, or it becomes something like with a lot of backline access in a previous set, in a later set, like think like a brand style comp where like you can easily lose some backline units if they're their only backline units. If those things become more relevant, we might see a resurgence of 4 Vanguard, 4 Marksman. But until then, that's why we usually just end up optimizing. It took time, right? It took lots of players, way better than I'll ever be, lots of time and lots of reps in order to figure out that this was the more optimal variation, and then I give it to you from my research and my knowledge that I did from my own trial and errors and checking and confirming with other people's opinions. So that's like an idea of optimizing a board, but you should consider this almost every time that you play a board. Now I'm going to do something here, right? I'm going to take a chat board from a comment video. So in a previous video that I did, I don't know where it is, but I did a previous video, and it was me responding to chat comments, and people were telling me about these interesting boards that they played with Hero Augment Gragas. So we're actually going to return to this for a second, and I'm just going to go through this board with the same analysis and talk about the units because I talked about it in the video. And obviously, as extends as usual, I'm not roasting the commenter in particular. That'll happen later, to not this commenter, to other commenters. But I'm not roasting anybody. I'm not being upset about anybody that's commenting. I'm just using this as an illustrative purpose for a teachable moment to explain. Like, I went to the Vanguard board and I explained it thoroughly. This is a board that I think would not work really well, and I'll explain why for multiple reasons. So first of all, this is with Gragas Hero Augment. So this is like you're playing Gragas Reroll and you're playing Gragas 3. And I think this is the board they said. Maybe one of the units is swapped, but it was basically 4 Slayer, 4 Bruiser. So I just put that in. And the idea was that you play Gragas, and Gragas is your main carry. He's going to do all your damage, and he's going to be really strong, and it's Gragas Hero Augment. And with Gragas Hero Augment, if you don't know, he just jumps around, he belly bumps everybody, and he stuns them, and he does a bunch of damage. Typically, when you're building Gragas Hero Augment, the item quality on him is a little bit awkward, and it usually extends to being like different renditions of some sort of Omnivamp or healing, some sort of attack speed, which is usually considered really important. It helps him to cast, helps him to do his damage, and then +1 item. So a lot of times you'll see something that looks like this on a Gragas build with Hero Augment. Like I said in the video, there's lots of different builds, and they're all kind of different, and they do different things. But I think this is the build that I think a lot of people say is really important because you want to have a lot of attack speed on Gragas. That's like the general feedback I get from my comment section whenever I say I don't think this comp is that strong. But so we'll go with attack speed here, which is usually QSS and some bow item and some sort of Omnivamp, right? So let's just assume these are our items, more or less. If we're making Gragas 3, let's look at our other units on our board. So we're playing 4 Bruiser and 4 Slayer. So first of all, the 4 Bruiser, that makes sense. What we're trying to do is we're trying to support this Gragas unit with some Bruiser to give him some more tankiness because he is a Bruiser unit. This makes sense. Now, why is it 4 Bruiser, not 2 Bruiser, not 6 Bruiser? I cannot tell you. I do not have reps with this, but usually what I would recommend is 6 Bruiser because your Gragas is going to get a lot of value off living forever, and he also makes it really deep into the back line. So if you don't have a way of de-aggroing on the Gragas, personally, I would already cast doubt here because 4 Bruiser doesn't seem as good as 6 Bruiser, especially if you're playing Gragas Hero Augment, but maybe that's just me. Let's continue. Let's talk about our item quality on our unit, and let's talk about our other things. Right here, we have 3 items on Gragas. Let's look at the other units that we're playing. First of all, the one that screams out to me is this Jarvan. Why is Jarvan on our board? What does Jarvan do? So Jarvan is not supporting our Gragas, right? Our Gragas is kind of like our front line and our damage. So Jarvan isn't really supporting either of that, right? Gragas is not a Slayer, he's just a Bruiser. Jarvan is just a Slayer. Additionally, Jarvan activating the Slayer synergy doesn't really matter here because he's gonna die. He's mostly a tank. Jarvan is supposed to be a frontline unit. So we're not activating Vanguard for Jarvan. So this Jarvan unit is going to be basically a useless frontline unit. Not going to be doing too much, and it's just supporting Slayer for our other Slayer units. Mundo makes sense here. We're Bruiser. We're just playing Bruiser, and we're trying to alternate with Slayer. And then we have our last 2 Slayers, which is the reason that we're playing this Jarvan, which is this Senna and this Zed, for example. These units do not support Gragas. Senna is Divinicorp, so we're increasing the Gragas HP bonus, but not by a lot. And the bonus that Senna is giving of AD is not very important on Gragas, because even though we're trying to get him to auto attack, a lot of his scaling is on AP, not on AD. So the AD that you get for Senna is not super relevant. Additionally, let's think about our itemization of Zed and Senna. Maybe these are going to be our dual carries. That's why we're committing 4 Slayer to this board. What items do you want to put on Zed typically? Well, typically we're going to try and put, like, you know, our glove items, right, i.e. whatever. We're going to try and put our sword items, right, you know, Bloodthirster, Sterex, those type of things. And we're probably going to try and put attack speed on him if we can, so sometimes it's going to be like a bow item. There's also blue buff, there's other stuff like that. Let's think about our Senna. What items are we going to put on our Senna? Well, we're typically going to put our sword items because Senna's like an AD unit. You usually want some attack speed, so our bow items are pretty important. And then a lot of times we're putting our glove items on Senna. Okay, cool. What items are we putting on Gragas? Well, on Gragas, if we're building him for attack speed and being like a frontline Bruiser melee style build, well, we're putting, you know, swords on the Gragas because, like, we need the Omnivamp. Usually it's Bloodthirster. Maybe it's not sword, but we're definitely putting glove. Like, QSS is pretty relevant if we're trying to build attack speed. And if we're not building attack speed with QSS, we're definitely building it with bows. All right, that's cool. Do you guys see a problem here? Because I do. The problem is that a lot of the items that we're putting on Gragas here are the same components that we would want to use on our Zed and our Senna. So not only are we committing half our board basically to supporting Zed and Senna, these units are also not typically going to have good item quality unless we high roll. That's a big problem, because if we're using components on Gragas, the way items work in TFT is that you're less likely to see a component that you already got dropped. That's why on Carousel, it's really important to get Carousel Prio and hit the things with certain reroll lines. Because if you get dropped a sword from neutral round, you're going to have a less likely chance of getting dropped another sword later, because the way the item drops work, you're just more likely to get a mixture of components than you are to get the same component repeatedly. So if we're using those key components that we would want to use on Zed and Senna on our Gragas, these units are not going to have good items. So we're having units with subpar items. Maybe we're re-rolling them. We don't even know in this variation if we're going for Senna 3, but this is a board that, as you can see, it starts to crumble really fast. So how do we fix that? Well, what are the Slayers actually doing? If they're not going to have good items and they're not going to be particularly strong, then it doesn't matter that we're lighting up a creative side of the board here, unless the unit itself is so broken, unless we're not playing around the synergies and we're playing around the units, and Zed is really broken, and Gragas is really broken, and Senna is really broken. These units are not going to contribute to the board that much, and it's going to make it really bad. This is an idea, or this is a concept of like cooking up a board that sometimes can go wrong. That's why when I looked at this in my comments, when I was originally responding to the comment review, I said I would not recommend this. Now, of course, you can try it out. Maybe this board is broken. Maybe I'm wrong in my judgment. I'm always okay with being wrong, and I do not care if I am wrong. Go ahead, try it out yourself. But if I'm looking at somebody who's like, you know, a beginner player and they ask me for advice, I would say I would not recommend this board because of the reasons that I just explained here. And I think that, you know, if you play this board against any Zeri board, I'm pretty sure you would just die instantly because all these units wouldn't do that much, right? You're just playing like negative units on your board just to activate synergies for the fact that Mundo's a Slayer, basically, right? Like, more or less, the main reason we're doing these synergies is because of this Mundo unit to tie everything together, right? Because equivalently, we could just play like Boombots, right? If like, why do we need the Slayers? Like, if all these units are just damage, why don't we play something for Cho'Gath, right? Why don't we play Cyberboss for this guy? You know what I mean? It feels arbitrary. Like, obviously there's some synergy with Zed and Gragas, maybe, that they like hit the same units and stuff. But that's what I'm trying to say. Your board has to be coherent in order to actually do damage and work very effectively. So I showed you 2 examples of how we kind of like deduced a strong board with like a current meta board. And of course, other people figured out for you. You can check out like different guides on my channel or other people's channels, and they'll kind of help you find good boards until you get to a skill level where you can evaluate them in a meaningful way. But that's just a common thing that occurs. And it's something that also makes it very hard, like I said, when there is a really strong dominant board, right? When you have a board like an Exotech board, things like these get punished really effectively, because this Exotech board, even if it doesn't have Sejuani 2 Zeri 2, if you try and play something and try and scam with a creative board, if your creative board doesn't like hit all the right notes, if it doesn't hit all the right spots and actually have a stable front line and back line, if your board isn't optimized to a point where it's actually behaving correctly as a cohesive unit, then you can get steamrolled by those boards, and that's where things fall apart really fast, right? The idea, if tanky comps are strong, you need to have good items and board quality to compete. This is what makes it feel bad when these comps are particularly meta, because it's basically forcing you into a skill check, and especially if you're a beginner player, that could be very overwhelming, which I understand, but that's just part of TFT, and it's just part of the thing. It's always something that occurs. There's always going to be a patch or a comp that is going to behave this way, that is going to be oppressive. And, you know, this time it's Exotech, right? You can also say it's Vanguard this, right? That's another line. Hey, you know what another line was in the previous patches? Like, you know what, it just got nerfed a little bit. You know what used to be really similar to this? Bastion Morgana. Who remembers this fun comp, right? That you just couldn't kill any units, and then you just slowly got whittled away by Morgana doing damage over time, that they just stalled you out. There's always going to be comps like this in TFT. Even if you go to, like, you know, the set Revival, I'm sure, like, when I played set 10, there was a really dominant comp called Ari Bastions, which was the same comp, right? It exists in every set of TFT, and it's a staple comp. And it's just like, whenever these comps exist, you just can't be playing like random stuff. Your stuff has to be very cohesive, and it has to be that skill check. You have to just get good enough at the game to properly be able to dismantle these comps by playing powerful boards that have good front line and good back line. So always focus on making sure, look at your board. Is my front line dying? Is a unit dying too fast? Why is that unit on my board? You have to ask yourself these questions in order to properly take advantage of those situations. Now, let's go over some other stuff about complaining. So a lot of this video came about because a lot of people are complaining about this, and I'm going to go through this right now because I don't like this. I do not like this at all, and I'll tell you guys why. So, in the recent, we talked about all of the things in the current patch of 14.6. Yesterday, I did a video on patch 14.7. Now, I read the comments for this video, not because I wanted to, because in the video, at the end of the video, I said, hey guys, I'm thinking of these other content ideas. I said, hey, do you guys want me to start a VOD channel? Would you guys want me to start like a unranked to climb journey, like something like that? Would that be interesting for anybody here? Let me know in the comments and I'll check it out. So that's why I was checking, right? So like, you know, we see the first comment. It's like, I would love to see a long grind video here. That's why I was reading the comments. Now, something that I noticed in the comments is something that's really crazy, which is a lot of people just being upset, right? Why did they ever fucking touch 14.5? It was perfect, bro. No, it wasn't. I'll explain that in a second. They did it again. 4 sets in a row. They uber nerfed the fast 8, fast 9 before the big turn, so we fucking reroll galore again. Oh, what's this? Garbage patch again, Lamau. 4 likes times 2. Why are we bitching? Now, let's look at this video for a second. Now, I just explained about reasons why things are frustrating. I can understand people are frustrated with the previous patch, right? We just talked about how Zeri is really oppressive. It can be very frustrating. I just talked about how boards can be really hard to construct. That's something that takes skill that you need to learn that could be very overwhelming. I understand that, right? I talked about these other things. Now, the reason these comments annoy me is because this patch review is addressing the issues that are there in the first place. Let's go through the video. What are they doing next patch? They are nerfing Exotech so that it is not as tanky. They are nerfing Vanguard so it is not that tanky. What are they doing to the reroll comms? They are nerfing Mundo, which is the dominant reroll 1 cost comm. They are nerfing Vi, which is another dominant 1 cost reroll comm. Zyra, which was a dog shit unit, usually you itemize Seraphine and you usually switched items off Zyra onto a brand if you ever played Mundo reroll, is also getting, like, she's getting buffed, but that's fine because she fucking sucked, right? If you don't think that she sucked, you need to play more of the game. What else are they doing? They're nerfing Graves, the other reroll comp that's really dominant. What else are they doing? They're buffing Vayne. Vayne fucking sucked. Maybe that's the reason people are upset, because Vayne got a buff. My bad. What else are they doing though? They're buffing Cho'Gath. They're buffing Misfortune. They're buffing Nico. They're buffing Ziggs, and they're buffing Vex. It's a fucking reroll galore. They're buffing all the 4 costs. My bad. Like, I don't understand. So what I hate with this is why I hate this. I hate my community. Like, this is my community that I try and curate the best that I can. I try and make it to such a point where it is inviting, it is welcoming, and we try and be responsible and nice about the things in the game, because this is what I want out of my community. I work for significantly less than minimum wage. I know that you might watch this video and you might get an ad on this video. Trust me, if I got a shift at McDonald's for the amount of time it took for me to record this video, let alone the work that goes in before doing this, like setting up for it, writing the script, writing my point form, doing all of that, trust me, I would be better off going to McDonald's and flipping burgers. I would make 10x the amount that I'm making here. I'm not even exaggerating. Like, legitimately, I'm not exaggerating. And you might ask, why don't you do that? Well, it's because I'm trying to make myself have enjoyment in my life, because my life isn't going particularly well right now. So I'm trying my best to, like, enjoy my life as much as I can, because, like, you know, shit happens. I hate when people are being needlessly annoying and needlessly mean for no reason. We should not be insulting or rude about the set when they're fixing the problems with the set. Right? I feel like that is completely backwards, and it's extremely toxic and not what I want out of my community. Because if we are complaining when they are fixing the problems, what are we going to do when there are actual problems? Why are we upset when they are fixed? I can understand if we were upset on patch 14.5 when they're buffing certain stuff, right? Why is it, and these are the ones that remain, by the way. I banned the more offensive comments as well, right? So there were more. Why is it that people are just being needlessly upset when, like, this is a matter of being better, right? If they are doing stuff to improve the quality of the game, we do not bite that back and be upset that they are improving the quality of the game. That is being needlessly abrasive, needlessly toxic, and it's making the TFT community a worse place. And if I have to speak up for it, I will, because I do not want to see that out of my community. We do not be upset when they are fixing the game. We be upset when they are not fixing the game. This patch, they are trying to fix all of the problems of the previous patch to improve it. This is the most dumbass shit I've ever seen in my life, that people are getting upset when they're fixing stuff. What are we doing here? I do not like this. If you are this type of person where you are just being needlessly upset, also the names are cut out a little bit. I didn't mean it intentionally. I don't really care. I'm not going to reformat it. If you really want to know it, you can go check the video. I don't really care. But what I'm trying to say is, why are we should not be getting upset when things are being improved in the quality of the game. Additionally, 14.5 was one of the worst patches imaginable. Really wish the tourneys were on 14.5. Everything was equally viable. No, it wasn't. 14.5 was so much worse. I don't think there's a single, I have not seen, I think I've watched in the most recent tournament on the weekend, the Tactician's Trial, I watched 14 different POVs and I took notes, because I was taking notes because I wanted to make sure that I had like good information for like my future guides that are coming out in the next week. That's what I do when a tourney happens. So trust me, I watched the tourney. I don't think there was a single one of those 14 POVs that said that 14.5 was better. They all said this was a better patch. All of them. What are we talking about? The tourneys need to be played on 14.5. 14.5 was so bad. You know what happened in 14.5? They changed the item quality to such an irreputably bad level that I couldn't even make an item guide on it because it fundamentally broke the game. Like, it was very bad. Like, the only difference between 14.5 and this patch is that Dynamo's a little bit less common. Anima Squad's a little bit less common, like those two comms, mostly because of Vanguards being really powerful and Dynamo getting a small nerf, and Zarya is really popular. But besides that, the comp is pretty much exactly the same, the patch, except you just have a better chance of playing around items. the reason that Zeri got buffed in the first place, by the way, we were talking about it before a little bit, but the reason that Zeri got buffed in the first place is to open up potential lines, especially flexible play, which is really important in TFT. The reason that Zeri is really essential to have as a functioning unit in the set is because if you have to make AD items and you don't have the conditions for the particular other lines, you have no options besides playing marksmans because they are tied together. So what happened in 14.5, if you played a lot of it, trust me, I played like 150 games on patch 14.5. What would happen is you'd be playing the game, and if other people had AD items, you were all playing the exact same line because there was no way to pivot off of it because you couldn't decouple from the other situations. So the reason Zeri was buffed in the first place wasn't just like, meep, let's buff Zeri for fun. It's because now you can actually pivot between Zeri and Aphelios. It opened up that option. And the same way in the most recent update that's coming in 14.7, they're buffing MF. They're trying to open up the lines so that when you're playing around 4 cost, you're not upset if you don't see the one unit that you're rolling for. It allows you to be able to play around multiple lines, which is healthier for the game. That is an improvement to the game. Now, whether you disagree with that or not, if they're trying to improve the game, they're nerfing Zeri. They're fixing the game over the patch. I do not want to see this in my community. I will ban, like, if you're really rude, I'll ban you. I'm not going to ban these people because they're not particularly rude, but I just want to make it very clear. I do not like spreading hate, especially when the hate is when we're doing improvements. At least be upset when something is going wrong. Like, if this patch note said Zeri's getting a buff, I would understand people being upset. This is stupid and ridiculous, and I'm ashamed of my community for doing that. Do not be like that. Be mature, be proper, or don't play the game. Like, I do not tolerate this shit. Right? The same way, like when the community is being rude or offensive or insulting to people. I had the Mortdog incident where like I said, hey guys, stop being mean to Mortdog. I got a bunch of comments that were people insulting Mortdog. I banned all their asses. I don't care. Okay? I'll gladly take a couple less subs to make sure this community is a positive and good place to make sure that we play proper TFT and we're happy and proud of what we are. And I stand by that. I want everybody here to actually enjoy and play this game and be fucking responsible. Like, what is this shit? Stop being like fucking whiny bitches. Holy fuck. It's so tilting. Because this is my community and I make sure that it's good. Now, positive note, I'll talk about why I complain. I'll throw you guys a bone. I complain a lot about this set. I actually don't like this set that much. But it's not because of those reasons. I'll say why I don't like this set. Just to extend a bone because, you know, if we're complaining, I'll complain back so that, you know, we extend a bone. I'm sure if you guys come on my streams, I'm inventing new swear words all the time while I'm playing TFT, right? But let's go through it, right? This is some of the other issues that might be why people are frustrated with the current set, because these are my frustrations and I'll see if they relate to you. But there's nothing related to this current patch. It's nothing related to the thing. It's just because of the set, right? I think the units are really boring, right? And reprints, when I say reprints, I mean like they're exactly the same, right? I played 600 games on set 13. This set, Morgana, is literally identical to what she was in set 13. With the same items or the same items on her, the comps are pretty much exactly the same, her synergies are pretty much exactly the same. So when I queue into set 14 and I have to play Morgana reroll again, it's like I've already played her like 100 times. I played 600 games last set. So it's extremely boring to me. And a lot of the other units are pretty much exactly the same as previous sets as well. And I've only been playing since set 9. So I can imagine if you've played like, you know, more than set 9, like if you played like since set 1, like the set is very like repetitive, it feels, right? And that's okay, that's fine. The main thing that they brought back as well, encounters. I hate encounters. I hate encounters from a previous set. That's true. The set mechanic, this set, hacks, was previously called encounters, and it was in set 11, and I hated it in set 11. So that's like a big reason why I hate stuff, right? So that's really miserable, because it's like the main set mechanic is also the same as what it was a previous set. So it just feels like, oh, even the main mechanic is not feeling very fresh to me. So that's another reason why I didn't like the set. Don't like the set that much. In addition, I'm also getting target griefed. I don't know what it is. I think it's because everybody's really upset and annoying. So like, you know, of course, like, you know, that's fine, right? It's like, it makes my experience really bad, and it makes me not want to play the game. Because like, you know, if I'm playing the game and somebody's just going out of their way to make sure that they drag me down to like a bot 4, even though like you know, like it's clearly the wrong play, and I'm just getting targeted. I don't know if it's because I'm like popular enough on YouTube. I don't think I'm big enough as a YouTuber that I'm getting targeted by people because of my name and my account. But like I'm probably gonna make a new account next season and try that out, because like this set, it's like a lot. Like it's a lot to a point where it's like this is getting like really like annoying for me, because it's like every like 5th game or so, and it's just like I just don't want to play. It's like I don't even care about ranking up anymore, because it's like, why the fuck am I getting targeted so much? Like it's just the worst players ever. You look at their account and they're just like 700 games, master 0 LP, just dragging me down for no reason. It's like that's why. It's like you guys have no fucking mental. It's so annoying. So that too. So those are the 3 main reasons, right? Then the other things, these are all mostly related to encounters, right? Some of the lines, I feel like there's a lot of different comps you can be played, but they're all very conditional, and that feels mostly like that because of the encounters, right? Encounters can often sway your board to be in a really good spot or a really bad spot, depending on what the encounter is, right? Whether it's HP for some of the more greedy lines, whether it's like items for some of the other lines, and depending on when you get the encounter, sometimes you can't play around it easily. Like you get it towards the end of the game and you just get like an influx of some bullshit, and it's like, oh, it's like it feels really bad, especially if you're playing like a particular line where you're either greeting or going for top 4 or playing really particularly, or you low rolled or you high rolled. It's just too much for me in a lot of games, and it makes it very tilting. Additionally, Cypher is way too strong. Cypher's getting nerfed, so that's a good change. Again, Cypher getting nerfed, yay. Black market augments, removing think fast, yay. Right? Black market augments are also a big point of frustration to me, because these are augments that already got removed from the game, right? Think fast was in set 9, and when I was playing in set 9, I was like, wow, this shit's really fucking broken. And then they removed it from the game, and you know, they had a patch note, you know, hey, here's the patch notes, and what do you know, think fast, it's fucking shit, so we're getting rid of it. And it's like, oh, you know, binary airdrop, that was something in set 9 and set 10. Guess what? Binary airdrop, too fucking broken. We're getting rid of it. And then it's like, oh yeah, scoped weapons, that's something that existed in 9. Guess what? In 9.5, it got fucking removed because it was broken. And it's just so tilting that I'm playing the game, and then black market augment appears, and then like 3 people hit some bullshit. One person hits think fast, one person hits binary, and I'm sitting there and it's like, I see axiom arc, it's like I can't take that, I'm playing AD. I see blue buff, blue battery, it's like I can't take that, I'm playing AD. Then I see share the spotlight, it's like I can't take that, there's a Sejuani player in the lobby, I'm just gonna get fucking, there's 3 Zeri players, I'm gonna get destroyed. So it's like, okay, I didn't roll a good black market augment, let me scout around here. Oh, it looks like I'm bot 4 because everybody else hit binary airdrop, my bad, oops, I guess I'm the bad player. Like, that's why I don't like the set, right? Which, you know, I try not to complain too much about. And I would like to say, this is all me personally, right? This is all me personally. You can enjoy the set for the exact same reasons, and that's totally valid and fine. You can agree with me for the same reasons, and I don't give a fuck who agrees with me or who disagrees with me, because this is my own personal experience, and I'm telling you guys, I wasn't having that much fun with the set. Of course, I'm going to try it the next patch, right? Next patch, they're getting rid of Think Fast, they're getting rid of Cypher, or sorry, not getting rid of Cypher, they're making Cypher a little bit more balanced, right? Maybe it addresses some of the issues that it makes the set more enjoyable for me. I'm going to try again. But you know what I'm going to do tomorrow? We're playing Death Stranding on my stream, right? We're going to try to do some other content, because instead of being toxic and mean to the devs and being annoying about this current set of the game and all of that shit, we're not going to worry about it. We're just going to do something else with our time, right? I gave it my best effort. I played as much as I could. I'll try and get Grandmaster later or whatever. I'll try and rank up to like my high rank, high GM, so that I can just put it on my YouTube that I hit the high GM or whatever again. But like, even if I don't, it's like, move on, right? Just be happy. Just fucking, don't be fucking shitheads all the time. But anyways, thanks for watching. If you stuck around till like after that part of like the ranting and stuff, that's fine. Like I said, I'm all on board for people just like, you know, voice your opinions, do whatever. But I just hate it when like there's like a patch where they're like it actually improving the game and we're still being needlessly rude and like it's just upsetting. I don't like that type of shit in my community, okay? Be respectful, be normal, and like play the game. And like if something goes, if they make improvements to the game, commend the improvements. And if they don't make improvements to the game, then say, I want these improvements to the game. But don't just be like, oh man, garbage, shit. Like you're like being like rude. Like this is why I don't read comments anymore. It's like we're being rude when they're doing a good job. Be rude when they're doing a bad job. Like, what is this? Like, hello? Like, what is going on here? But anyways, I digress. Tomorrow we're gonna do some guides. Wednesday we're gonna do our updated like patch 14.7. Like best comps on the patch, so look forward to that if you're looking forward to playing the game. Thank you for watching, have a great day, and see ya, bye bye.